the road of peace before us. Build it wide and deep and long. Speed the slow and check the eager. Help the weak and curb the strong. None shall push aside another. None shall let another fall. March beside me, oh my brothers, all for one and one for all.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us out there in YouTube land for another edition of the Rising Tide Foundation Dialogues, where today I have the pleasure of talking with Dr. Edward Lozansky. Just to say a few words of intro, I and my wife Cynthia had known about Dr. Lozansky for a number of years through the conferences that he had organized with his various organizations like the World Russia Forum in Washington, D.C., where conferences bringing together politicians, experts, dealing with dialogue, development of the Arctic, the Bering Strait Rail Tunnel were always showcased and very prominent, and were always points of a lot of edification and hope. More recently, we had the great pleasure through a mutual friend, Martin Seif, a journalist in the US who introduced us last year. And Cynthia and I had the pleasure of getting to know you a little bit more directly and also participating in the wonderful Elbe Day event of 2020, where we were surprised to show up and you know, we gave a few remarks in support of it, and other people who were on surprised us, like Maria Zakharova addressed it, as well as 2 Russian cosmonauts from space directly also addressed the event with high-level military statesmen, other figures from both the USA, from Europe, from Russia, who are all remembering together the importance of Elbe, the Elbe meeting in Germany, which really signaled a shift not only for the defeat of Nazism, but also a hope for a new age of brotherhood of US-Russia relations. So the rekindling of that was just so important, and it's even more important today, a year later, as things have decayed diplomatically to a point where the serious danger of a third world war, this one being nuclear, is very high. So we're going to say a few words a little bit later in this interview about your current plans or the current Elbe Day event, which will be happening in about 10 days time. But before we do that, Ed, I would like you to speak a little bit to our audience and just say, how is it that a man who was a nuclear physicist teaching in Russia found himself in the unlikely position of being a back-channel diplomat of sorts between US and Russian statesmen throughout the 1980s, 90s, to the point that you found yourself as a world citizen and real peacemaker to the present day? So how did that shift happen, and how did you find yourself where you were?
Mm-hmm. At the age of 14, I was studying in high school in the city of Kyiv, Ukraine. This place is now in the news, daily news, and some think that this can be the place where World War III may start. God forbid, I hope that this won't happen. But in the news, Ukraine now, many people didn't know Ukraine what it is, but now it may become like a Serbia for World War I or Poland for World War II. And now I hope and pray this will happen. But I was born in this place, and at the age of 14, I read a book by Robert Young, American author, who its title is The Brighter Than a Thousand Suns. It's about the explosion of atomic bomb, which was developed in the Los Alamos lab, who was and the father of atomic bomb, Robert Oppenheimer. And this really book, I was fascinated by it, and I thought I will be a nuclear physicist. So after I graduated from high school in Ukraine, in Kyiv, I went to Moscow to see to the best place where you can get to become a nuclear physicist. And not immediately, but after a couple of attempts, I entered the most prestigious university which trained nuclear physicists. It's called National Research Nuclear University. I graduated and was accepted to graduate school, even more prestigious, called Kurchatov Institute of Atomic Energy. It's the equivalent of Los Alamos Lab. It's a place where, named Kurchatov, its father, like Robert Oppenheimer, he was father of Soviet atomic bomb. So I reached really, it was great career in front of me. But then at the same time, physicists, sometimes they are, not, people who don't really accept things, which they think that something is wrong. If you know that Robert Oppenheimer get in big trouble, and in our lab, a similar lab in Moscow, physicists also get in trouble as well for criticizing Soviet policy, and especially the peak of this was 68, because 68 Soviet Union invaded Prague, because Prague, Czechoslovakia, General Secretary of the Communist Party was experimenting with idea that socialism can be developed together with freedom, socialism with human face. Soviet Union didn't like it and sent troops, and the Prague Spring was crashed. We didn't like it at all. We criticized it openly, but our, of course, room was tapped. The same thing as Robert Oppenheimer in this book. It was also tapped. Always we're moving in the same parallel universes.
What the FBI was doing on its scientists and what the KGB was doing on its scientists were, you're saying, very, very similar.
I had a problem to find a job, so I made some money by tutoring, and then make this. I eventually, what happened? I married through tutoring a daughter of the man who actually was in charge of this invasion to Prague. But then I get in trouble again because General didn't like that I also continue express my dissident views. They thought that once I become part of the Soviet nomenclatura with all those privileges, and we had a lot of those privileges, then I was shut up. But I have many friends who still were in trouble because they were expressing their own opinion, criticized Communist Party. Some of them went to jail. Some of them went to mental institutions. Some were thrown out of the country. Eventually, I became a problem for my father-in-law because his career also was in jeopardy because his son-in-law is a troublemaker. So I was given the choice: either I was shut up and become loyal communist, and at least on paper, or I simply can go. Whatever I did already could serve like 5 or 7 years in jail, or I can be put in mental institution, or simply get out of the country. So this was the choice. So my wife and I, we talked about it, and we agreed that, okay, let me, instead from all those choices, probably the best for me to leave the Soviet Union, and then she will join me later on if, we'll try to do everything possible to get her out as well. Right. It was a very risky operation, very risky.
And I read your autobiography, Building Bridges, which people should buy. Actually, I'll make a link in our video section below this video. But you made the point that part of your getting out involved in negotiation with her father, that you divorce with the promise that after a year or so of you being politically inactive, the promise was that she would be then released also from Russia. You could rejoin, remarry, and live happily ever after, which was part of the plan, right?
Sure. And my wife trusted her father, and that's why we agreed that the best thing for us is instead of go to jail or mental institution or become like a loyal communist, it's better for me to leave and then try to get my wife. We already had a child at the time. She was 5 years old. So I went to America. I immediately was hired by a laser fusion lab in the University of Rochester, because this was my narrow field. I was working on laser fusion. The same thing that Edward Teller worked. Edward Teller was father of H-bomb. Actually, I met him when I went to America. But so I was hired. My professional life was great, but my wife was still detained. It took us 6 years to finally succeed. And she came in '82. It was front page of every major newspaper in America, front page New York Times, Washington Post, all that. Was happy ending, like American way, book, movie, all this stuff. So, but then during those 6 years, of course, I was teaching the research, I was teaching at the university, but my main thing was to bring my family, my wife and my daughter. And for that, I had to leave my job at the University of Rochester. I had to be in Washington because Washington is a place where you can do something. So I got a job at American University in DC. But my main thing was I was staying almost every day with a poster protest outside the Soviet embassy, demanding release of my wife. And also I was going from office to office on Capitol Hill, asking members of Congress to sign petition. I went to the State Department. It even was able to get into the White House, not immediately to, at that time was to President Carter, but to his aides. So I became more or less like full-time lobbyist, but lobbyist, no, not for money, but lobbyist for my family. It took us 6 years. By the time, it's a long story, but
yeah, no, and you also go through in your book how you were an international figure in many ways, because you would take your savings and you would fly around the world whenever you could to various other
campaigning not only in Washington but in Paris and Stockholm during the Olympic Games in Lake Placid. I was collecting petitions. Then also in '79, I went to Stockholm. And Mother Teresa, she got Nobel Peace Prize. So I was able to get to Mother Teresa, and she also signed petition. So this was so of course, didn't have too much for physics, but my wife and child, this was probably more important. Then when Reagan became president, I also by the time, get some kind of a good PR. I was in all major news. And eventually, Ronald Reagan, he put her on special list for exchanges. So, because sometimes after arms control negotiations, there were like side talk about human rights, and the United States would ask Soviets to release some kind of people in the Soviet Union, and Soviet Union would ask Americans to release some Soviet spy who was arrested. So it was a kind of exchange. And eventually, my wife was put on this list, and she was exchanged. I don't know for whom. It's a top secret. I don't want to know. But she was exchanged, and she came to Washington in '82. Again, I said front pages, books, movies, all that stuff. But then, by the time I became like almost professional lobbyist, and I felt that, I got my wife, but then Andrei Sakharov. It's like a Russian Edward Teller, because Kurchatov was Russian Robert Oppenheimer, atomic bomb, but Andrei Sakharov developed Soviet H bomb, and so like Edward Teller is considered to be father of H bomb in the United States. Right. So Sakharov was arrested, and I felt that I live happily, I have my family, freedom, all that stuff, but Andrei Sakharov is now in exile, and
he was arrested for his political views or his criticisms of the Soviets,
because he was boss like Robert Oppenheimer. Sometimes physicists, in addition to physics, they also have some
they have moral views.
So he was arrested, but then he was simply in exile. They couldn't put Sakharov was such a famous, decorated, so they removed him from Moscow so he could meet reporters, and he went to secret city called at that time Gorky, now it's called Nizhny Novgorod, that no foreigners were allowed to go. So at least they isolated him from the press and all that. So I felt like it's my responsibility to bring Sakharov as well out of exile, and so I formed Andrei Sakharov committee, and we started now the same way I was lobbying for my wife. I started lobbying for Andrei Sakharov and some other dissidents who were in jail. So again, it's a sad story for me, because from physicists, I think was pretty good physicist. Then I became like a public activist and I couldn't stop. It's just, I still, of course, thought I had to make my living. So I thought, of course, physics and all that. But the research, you have to concentrate. You can't be a physicist in research, in running around, Capitol Hill and all those places. But then suddenly, out of the blue, Gorbachev came and became General Secretary, the same like Dubček. He decided to do what Dubček did in Czechoslovakia, Gorbachev. He also wanted to build communism with human face. And suddenly I got invitation from Gorbachev, not himself, but his aide, who knew me, physicist also, his name is Yuri Sipyan. He was Gorbachev's science advisor, and he knew me as a physicist. And suddenly I got invitation to come to Moscow. I was actually shocked because, Soviet press called me enemy of the people, CIA agent, all the stuff they call dissidents and all that. Suddenly I am invited.
And I just wanted to add one thing here. Which the viewers might not have caught. The reason why you were, I think, on the radar was that you had made a bit of a splash internationally, because I saw a video of you on YouTube standing next to Ronald Reagan as he was announcing the creation of Sakharov Day in 1983. Right. And it became something they couldn't ignore, that you were not only talking with the president and actually manifesting in the form of policy, but also many other leading politicians in the USA were becoming your friends quickly, as well as your incredible story with your wife as well.
I love it. This day, it was May 21. I remember this day. It's May 21. It's Andrei Sakharov's birthday, and he was 60. And so we decided to celebrate his birthday, and with a special event, both in the White House and in the Kennedy Center. It had special, it was a gala with most famous musicians playing his birthday. And I did the whole thing. I went to every office because, in America, to have a day in your name, you have to be dead, because you can have a day of someone who is alive, because otherwise all the celebrities would want to do the same. Yes. So, but it was first time that the National Sakharov Day, and he was alive. And for that, we had special Congress resolution allowing president to do that, and I did the whole thing. But that's why I stayed next to Ronald Reagan and many other, Ted Kennedy, by the way. Ted Kennedy stayed, Senator Dole, all the famous people. And my wife at the time already was free, and she was in the audience in the Rose Garden. So apparently Gorbachev people saw it, and they thought that I'm very important. And that's why they invited me, because I was I knew all the dissidents in the Soviet Union, some of my friends. And also I was connected in the American establishment. So they thought that I'm very important. That's why Gorbachev told Yuri Sipyan, said, listen, you know this Lozansky, bring him to Moscow. I want to talk to him. So I was frankly afraid, because I thought they put me in jail.
Right? Are you walking into a trap?
They called me CIA agent. Yeah, but then I couldn't resist. I wanted to see my friends, and of course Tatiana, her family, her father and her mother, all the stuff. So we just went, and immediately Gorbachev right-hand man, Alexander Yakovlev, he actually was father of this perestroika and all that thing. We met, and I asked him, why me? He said, because we know your biography and all that stuff. You know that you are like in between two worlds. You know everyone in Moscow, you know everyone in Washington. Help us to bring a message to Ronald Reagan and to America, that we, from now on, no more communist ideology promotion. No, we want to be part of the West. No, we want to be American ally, not just partner. We want to be ally. I couldn't believe what I hear. No, General Secretary. Then he introduced me to Gorbachev. So General Secretary of the Communist Party is telling me that he wants to be American ally, So anyway, it's from now on, I thought I have a mission. I have a mission to have Russia and America. It was still Soviet Union, but still want to be not just friends, but allies. And that's why on my website, russiahouse.org, it says from confrontation to alliance. Everyone thought that I'm insane, how you can be ally with Soviet Union. But I said, well, everyone told me I'm insane when I was trying to bring daughter. By that time, my father-in-law became 4-star general. So everyone thought you can have 4-star general daughter to leave. It's only, it's just insane. I said, well, maybe I'm insane, but I succeeded. So why not succeed in this case as well? And every year we had a meeting on Capitol Hill called US-Russia Forum. We'll bring many famous people from Moscow, many, of course, members of Congress, some prominent businessmen, all that stuff. It's like a 2-day forum, talk how we can become allies. And at some point, we made some good progress. But I think what happened, why we failed, is that we were against very powerful law. I was kind of a the lobbyist, kind of not paid lobbyist for my ideas. And there was another group which was working against us. And this group was this military-industrial complex. Military-industrial complex didn't want Russia as ally, didn't want Russia as a friend or partner. It wanted Russia as enemy. Only because if Russia is no enemy, why would we want to spend hundreds of billions of dollars for all those weapons? So it's
you were able to in the course of your book.
We were against not just me, President Eisenhower. He was the first who said that I want to do many good things, but this military-industrial complex. So before I said it, President Eisenhower said that.
This is not a Soviet anti-American infiltration here.
Moreover, George Kennan. Everyone's now talking about George Kennan because it was kind of an anniversary of his birthday, whatever. George Kennan, of his speech, famous telegram and all that. George Kennan, in 87, Soviet Union still around because Soviet Union collapsed in 91. So George Kennan said, famous phrase, if for example, one day we wake up and Soviet Union is no more, Soviet Union is drowned in the ocean, then we will have to find another enemy because otherwise without enemy, why would we need this military-industrial complex? And actually American economy will suffer a lot because this military-industrial complex also is a driver for the economy. So it's logically, so I have to admit that so far we are failing, that we are not partners, we are not, of course, allies, but we are enemies. And today, as we speak, we expect a speech by Joe Biden. And Joe Biden just today announced new round of sanctions. This is insane because just a couple of weeks ago, he invited Putin for a meeting. And first time he said he wants to meet like in a few months. Then he called again. He said, I want to meet faster. I want to meet you in a few days, a week or two. And then he invited Putin to take part in this summit, ecological summit. And suddenly, so usually when you invite someone for a meeting, you bring flowers, or you bring cake, well, at least, but instead of flowers or cake, or extend your hand to shake hands, every new sanctions, enemy, it's his rhetoric.
The famous insult of Putin as being a soulless killer just a few weeks earlier as well, right there on the platter.
But how come you want to talk to someone and then you call him a killer, and then you have this expelled diplomats, huge avalanche of sanctions? Of course, now all this talk about meeting is now the thing is we're getting now very, very close to World War III, to something when we started. And I'm afraid that my birthplace, Kiev, can be like a point, the same like Warsaw in World War II or in Serbia, World War I. It's horrible.
Well, let me ask you this question then, because And it's great that you brought up the sort of two opposing foreign policy doctrines in America, going back to the Eisenhower desires and his warnings of the military-industrial complex, compared to what you also had to deal with in your lobbying, where you were trying to bring about the better America that represents something which the world could desperately needs, as a bastion of freedom, of free enterprise, of cooperation. That idea was something you confronted as well in the late 80s, 90s, when there was a hope, when the Soviet Union was going through its transformation, its dissolution. There was an idea and a promise being made from one component of the US establishment that they would want to help Russia develop their infrastructure with $1 billion or more of investments. I think it was more into infrastructure to help them sort of really have a long-term strategy and have a relationship on that basis. And then you had this opposing part of the US establishment, this military-industrial side, as you just went through, that sabotaged that and that said, no, we're just going to make sure that the Soviet Union collapses and we have a unipolar age, and that's it. That's the end of history. Maybe you could say a little something about that before we jump back into the current events of World War III danger that's currently
what happened after this meeting with Gorbachev, and then of course we know that the Soviet Union collapsed and then Yeltsin came. I brought a lot of Gorbachev people before that and Yeltsin people to Washington, and I introduced them to Washington establishment, and our kind of the guy who I met several times was Vice President Dan Quayle, and Dan Quayle was very positive toward what we were thinking. He said, yes, maybe it will be great for America if Russia is our ally. So I assumed that Dan Quayle was not part of this military-industrial complex. Maybe that's why he didn't win the elections, because in '96 he was running for the White House, and he didn't have support, because this is someone who wants to be friends with Russia doesn't have a chance. And when Trump somehow miraculously succeeded, then he was thrown out immediately. It's interesting that they say that Russia interfered in the elections, but it was, I don't know what, Russia maybe did some minor things. It was like establishment, they interfered in the elections and succeeded in the Joe Biden victory. So this is, and of course, it's much easier to accuse Russia. Now, whatever has happened, what's wrong in the United States is Putin is to blame.
It's all Putin, yeah.
Even this
bad weather, there's a hurricane, it's Putin.
Yeah, even this riot in Capitol Hill, anything that is wrong, Black Lives Matter riots, also Putin, everything is Putin. But this helps, of course, my good friend, actually, I know him from the old days, Reagan days, because he was CIA top aide to Reagan, morning briefer. He would, his job was in the morning when Reagan comes to the office, Ray McGovern had to put on his desk morning brief of what all the major things that happening in regard to Soviet Union, because no, Soviet Union. So Ray McGovern, he's now retired. So he expanded because military industrial complex, it's MIC. He said, now we have another 4 letters and another 4 letters to that. And you have to add to MIC, you have to set Congress, C, intelligence, I, academy, A, think tank, complex. So now it's expanded. And I have to admit that I succeeded in winning over Soviet Union, and actually title of my book, which actually brought us some glory and some money actually too. It's called "When Love Triumphed Over the Kremlin." So it's called Tatiana, it's the name of my wife, but the subtitle was "When Love Triumphed Over the Kremlin." So we succeeded in the Soviet Union. Our love, we won, but we are not succeeding with MIC, C, whatever, I, Academy, think tank. We are not succeeding. I have to admit, we are not succeeding.
No. Well, yeah, and this is also something which I think is interesting, is that throughout your career, your life, you've been called, as you mentioned, a KGB agent by a lot of paranoid Americans. You've been called a CIA agent by a lot of paranoid Russians. And today, I mean, it's happening again where, you know, I Google your name and there's these incredible slander websites of you being a KGB tool of Putin, you know, who's infiltrated the U.S. establishment. And it's like, you can't get a break. You're no matter where you go, you're always being attacked by everybody for being something that you're not, because consistently your message has been the same message.
Julian Assange, the honor of being quoted. Someone asked Julian Assange, who is this Edward Lozansky? Tell him, who is it? He's KGB or CIA? And Julian Assange said, you know, I can't figure it out. Julian Assange, I have to admit now on this program, I am maybe double agent for both countries. I want two countries to be allies. This is my dream. Well, but this is a double agent. Right?
Well, that's it. So I think that the anybody who actually looks at your work and writings and just judges you for your actions sees that there's a constant theme that has never changed from the beginning all the way through to the present and future, which is, again, as you just said, peace, avoid nuclear war and Holocaust and nuclear Armageddon, and work together on common interest. That's really been your life's theme.
Absolutely.
As a musical theme going throughout the composition, it's the same one. And you'd have to really be blind and short-sighted or myopic to not miss that whole gestalt. Which brings us to the current events. As you mentioned, we're in a very grave situation. There is currently, I believe, 30,000 troops that have begun mobilization on Russia's border as part of the Defender Europe 2021 exercises. There's new sanctions against Russia, a seeming almost intention to burn and blow up all of the potential diplomatic bridges. And a lot of people are saying, oh, nuclear war is impossible. They would never, I used to believe this too, actually, I'll admit that. They would never let it get that bad. Don't worry. However, when you start looking at history with a critical eye, you start seeing that, no, the argument that we haven't blown ourselves up yet, and so it will never happen, is really stupid, because there's been so many instances where it was only the miraculous actions and brave actions of individuals that stopped nuclear war from already happening throughout the Cold War. One should not be too comfortable, but how do you respond to these people? How do you shake them out of their stupor and realize the danger such that they can then begin to open up their minds and think about, well, what is needed, what solutions we should be thinking about?
Well, what we use what we call like people's diplomacy, right? And people's diplomacy, of course, it's very difficult for people's diplomacy to compete with this monster that we discussed with 7-8 book letters, whatever. But still, I feel that simply sit and wait until we get this nuclear war, it's not in my nature. So we're trying to do what we can. And one thing is we're trying to find, I'm teaching a course now, US-Russia relations, and to my students, and now with the help of Zoom, we can, any students from any place, not necessarily only my group, but any student can sign up and all that. We are talking about what we as individuals, private individuals, can do. And we thought that maybe one idea which comes to mind, and we actually already did many things on that, is April 25, which is coming pretty soon. April 25, 1945 was a high point. When you're talking about alliance, we were allies. We were allies in April, well, not only in April, but during the World War II, at least last 2 years when there was a second front from the United States. And the city in Torgau in Germany, Elbe River, American troops were advancing from the west, Soviets from the east. And what happened is, for me, it's also personal, because both my father-in-law, Tatiana, and my own father, they were in this group of Soviet military advancing, and they met Americans. It was a really great time. It was a dancing, singing, embracing, drinking, of course, it's very emotional. There are plenty of photographs of this little thing, and our parents, my wife, were in this group. So for us, it's really, really personal. So that's why we get the word allies, because we were allies in 45. So that's why my motto is "What not allies again." So we every day, every year when it's April, we try to bring Americans and Russians together, and we succeeded many times. We had in Moscow American embassy personnel to come to this event, and in Washington, American officials, State Department come to this event. So we had simultaneous events, and then we became using teleconference where people from Moscow would speak to Americans, Americans would speak to Russians. It's great. So now what's happening next? We came up with the idea. Actually, I have to thank Joe Biden now from all of it, because Joe Biden, he decided to do on April, but April 22 and 23 ecological seminar or summit. And he invited Putin and Xi Jinping and the total 40 leaders, including Xi Jinping and Putin, to talk about how we can save planet from climate change. I said, okay, now, so you do it 22, 23. What about on 25? We do the following thing. We do also like celebration of usual annual celebration, but we do it with planting trees. Because if you plant a tree, every tree you plant, it absorbs certain amount, small of course, certain amount of CO2. But if you plant a trillion trees, then you can reduce by maybe 50% all this concentration of CO2. And this is science. It's science. It's not like a kind of a wishful thinking. We're talking about science.
Exactly.
So we thought that what we're going to do now, not simply make speeches, put flowers, honor veterans, but we also will plant a tree, and we'll call for the world, not just 40 leaders, but the whole mankind, 220 countries which belong to UN, this day also plant trees. And start this campaign, of course, to plant a trillion trees, it takes time. It's probably need 10 years, whatever, but we have to start this process.
Well, and I think that that's the important idea symbolically of the theme of having trees planted to celebrate brotherhood and peace, is that it's about the future, and you're taking a very proactive approach to the idea of what Biden says is his big priority, rather than the some people are saying, oh, no, we should shut down industrial civilization as a solution to stopping CO2 emissions. And you're providing a very nice contrast, saying, no, how about we don't do that, and instead let's build these trees that have multiple purposes, providing oxygen, receiving CO2, and creating symbolic meaning of peace and cooperation with deep roots for everybody. So I think that that's a much healthier approach to climate change than some of the other ideas.
We're not doing this. We're not losing jobs. We're adding jobs.
Exactly.
Because to plant a trillion trees, we create a lot of jobs. And you know, so we'll see how it goes. But so far, I see tremendous response from people around the world, from India, from China, from Latin America. So it's really picking up.
Good.
We'll see how it goes. But today, great news today that we were giving most beautiful, most prestigious location in Moscow to plant this tree. It's a place where people, it's a park. It's really the most, I don't know what to compare. Well, maybe like Central Park in New York. Really, most famous event. So we're going to plant trees in this place, and then we'll have teleconference. And so people from any place, doesn't matter where you are. You can be in Latin America, China, Canada, of course, any place. You plant a tree, and then you make a short video, and then send it to us, and we'll post it. Of course, you can post it on your social network, but we'll post it on the website, which will have hopefully several million likes and videos. So this is something that campaign we're going to start on Sunday, April 25.
Well, and certainly on that point, Cynthia Chung, my wife, and myself will be certainly doing that this weekend. We'll be planting a tree, delivering a little message to video, and sending it your way. And for anybody who is listening, and also before I have you tell people how they can also participate, where they should go to which website to sign up and send their video to you, I just want to make a point that this proposition of yours, this plant a trillion trees, was something that you initiated with some colleagues of yours a few years ago, and it got to the point where it was even picked up by former President Trump himself, who endorsed this at the World Economic Forum of last year, which was
amazing.
Huh? Yeah, that was good.
This was amazing because a couple of my friends and I, we had. I'm also like writing columns for Washington Times, and we run this column and say, what a good idea! If you plant a trillion trees, then this will save our planet without cutting jobs and all that. So then almost next day, Trump went to Davos. It was like scheduled, like it was in February sometime. In Davos, he said, "You know what? I'm going to plant trillion trees." Trump. I don't know. I wish that he did it because he read my article. Washington Times, actually, it's the only paper that supported Trump. So maybe Trump read it because sometimes you want to read not only nasty things about you from New York Times and Washington Post. Sometimes you want to read something good. So he saw my article. I don't know. But
I
anyway,
think that it's a likely hypothesis. It's a strong hypothesis.
He said Davos, but then he came to Washington, and next day he had addressed to the nation. It was the State of the Union, and he repeated the same thing.
Yes,
he repeated, "I'm going to plant it." Moreover, he formed a special department, a Department of Interior, called Trillion Trees Department. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it still exists because Biden, when he came,
probably not.
Yeah, he was canceling everything.
But I think the important thing is that it was installed in the zeitgeist. It was something that was infused into the psyche of the people, that created a new set of potentials in the mind and the imagination of the collective, which is very important because you need that space of the mind in order to begin to move and make action and policy. So I think that was very important that your work cultivated in that and will continue coming out of this Elbe Day event to continue to grow that space in which dialogue can occur. Now, for people listening who would like to participate, either to watch, to say a remark on video that they could send to you, or just share the message, how do they get in touch with you? How do they
very easy.
Elbe Day?
Website russiahouse.org.
Russiahouse.org.
Russia House, the same as John Le Carre. No. So russiahouse.org. And they'll see a link called US-Russia Forum, and US-Russia Forum has all this information, and also how to get additional information, sign up, and all that stuff. So it's a simple thing to join.
Great. And so what we'll do, everybody who would like to know the full story, we're going to do another, maybe in a few weeks' time, we'll do another follow-up interview to go through your bio a little bit more. But until then, if people can't wait, go to the description in under this video. I will have a link for anyone to purchase your Building Bridges autobiography, which is a wonderful read, and to get the full story of which is just an incredible adventure. Additionally, I'm going to include the video, the short 5-minute video of Ronald Reagan's speech in 1983 with a younger Ed Lozansky with a different color, a different hue of hair, standing right next to him. So that'll be something people can watch, and a link to your website, to Russia House as well, so people can get involved. So thank you so much, Dr. Lozansky, for joining us, and hopefully we'll do another one very soon.
The setting of the melody from the choral section of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony to the words by Schiller, "All men are brothers, alle Menschen werden Brüder." Praise to joy, the God descended, daughter of Elysium, ray of mirth and rapture blended, goddess, to thy shrine we come. By thy magic is united what stern custom parted. Why all mankind are brothers plighted, where thy gentle wings abide. schöne Götterfunken, Tochter aus Elysium. Wir betreten feuertrunken, himmlische dein Heiligtum. Deine Zauber binden wieder, was die Mutter streng geteilt. Alle Menschen werden Brüder, wo dein sanfter Fliegel weilt. Build the road of peace before us, build it wide and deep and long. Speed the slow and check the eager, help the weak and keep the strong. None shall push aside another, none shall let another fall. March beside me, oh my brothers, all for one and one.